So I'm here again, hopefully with less sleep deprivation than last time. And Steve, my coworker, we're going to be doing a two-part presentation. We're going to be talking about generating a load through JMeter, and we're going to talk about analyzing performance analytics and bottlenecks through a tool called New Relic, which is my favorite tool of the year so far. So before I get started with that and turn things over to Steve, you want to get set up while I'm blabbing? At some level, one of the things that's important in general, but especially around performance, is data, right? It's data points and metrics and knowing what's going on and who's doing what. And data is interesting because there's data that you think you know, and there's data that you know, and there's stuff that you don't know. Case in point is I'm trying to get more data on my life. So I've got a Nike Fuel Band that tracks like everything I do. It tells me like, you know, am I getting enough exercise or not, and it's kind of competitive against my friends. And I'm also using a tool called Rescue Time. I'm sure most of you may have heard of. I've just started using it, I've been putting it off forever because I'm like, I don't need that. I know where I waste my time, and I know where I don't waste my time. I know what I do that's productive and what I do that isn't productive. And it turns out I don't. I really underestimate how much time I spend on Hacker News during the day, and overestimate some other ways I might be wasting time. And it's very interesting to see when I'm productive throughout the day. It's way earlier in the morning than I thought it would be. So there's assumptions that we make about data that are wrong, and some of them that are right. But I think it's important to get real visibility and analytics on all the data that we take for granted to validate our assumptions or to learn new things. And that ties in directly with performance work, right? We think of certain things. We know this is going to be fast. Maybe it's not as fast as we think, or we know this is going to be slow. We don't realize how many people it's going to impact. And so a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about here is ways to get real data, real actionable data, and then monitor your changes over time as it relates to web performance. So, kind of high level. Steve Hall.
Hi, my name is Steve Hall. I'm actually the infrastructure specialist at SparkMeter. I've had a sort of a long and varied past working for several companies, including ATG back in the day with Lisa Gassaway, who just started with Akamai 10 days ago, I think, right? So, so I've had various performance QA roles, general problem solving and troubleshooting roles, and now at SparkMeter, I'm basically able to take all of those different jobs of the past and combine them into one job description. So it's actually fantastic. To ask, how many of you guys have used JMeter in the past? Okay, so fairly decent number. What we're going to do, first of all, is I'm just going to briefly show you how to create a JMeter script, talk about how we have approach the problem of generating enough load to test our client sites, and I'm going to go through. I'll run a brief script using the ATG demo website, and then from there, Devin's hopefully we'll let it run for about 5 minutes, enough to generate some meaningful load, and then Devin's going to come through with New Relic and show how he looks at the performance statistics, and basically we're just going to show you what we do. This is basically how we test a client site before it goes live, for example. Yeah, the resolution on this is a little weird, so forgive me for having sort of half and three-quarter screens here. It's not the best ideal situation, but I think we'll get through it. So when I started with SparkMeter, Devin approached me with a problem. And that was, how can we generate enough load to adequately test a client site, and basically keeping it basically keeping the cost down, and using something that's basically it's got a tool that's been used for a while, and it's been proven in the field. So how do we do that? And I know, having used JMeter in the past, one of the big problems was always generating enough load. I know, having put the various JMeter agents on the servers, usually very quickly you've got a problem where it's running out of memory, it's using too much CPU, and then you've got, boom, you're not testing your site anymore. You're trying to troubleshoot your JMeter problems. So luckily, we're sort of an interesting position. We are a managed hosting provider for a very specific niche market, which is ATG e-commerce software. So all of our customers are e-commerce sites, such as a couple of clients. We have Payless Shoe, Payless.com, StrideRight.com, Furniture Row, Vermont Country Store, People's Choice Awards. These are some of the ATG customers that we actually do managed hosting for. Now, our infrastructure provider is SoftLayer. They're based out of Texas, and they have data centers around the world. So one thing that SoftLayer has recently introduced is really big. They're trying to really push cloud computing. So they've introduced a very easy web interface via their portal where you can literally spin up virtual machine instances within a matter of 10-15 minutes, and it's fantastic. So what I did is I basically created a JMeter template image through SoftLayer that has JMeter, whatever JMeter version we're using. The latest, I think it's a JMeter 2.7 at this point. So this template has that all installed and configured. It's sitting out there in SoftLayer. So, for example, Vermont Country Store comes and says, listen, we're going to be going live with new hardware. We want to make sure that our site is performing. I can literally go, I can use that template, and I can spin up an unlimited number, I suppose technically an unlimited number of, we haven't really tried, I mean, too many at this point. I mean, 4 is actually the number of agents that we use currently. That provides more than enough load for us. But essentially, I can spin up any number of instances within 10-15 minutes. And so across the world. Across the world. That's the other thing. We have SoftLayer has data centers. They have it in Seattle, San Jose, Dallas, Washington, D.C., Amsterdam, Singapore. And I think they're working on doing something in South America at this point. So I can I can choose which data center I want to spin up the VM in. I can choose the amount of memory it has. I can choose the number of CPUs, basically all that stuff. Get it set up. I can assign a host name to it, and within 10-15 minutes, I can have all these VMs set up, ready to go. So what I typically do, what we've been doing, is we typically use about 500 virtual users per agent. We spin up 4 VMs, so basically 4 JMeter agents, and then we have a 5th VM, which is the console. I'm really sort of a GUI kind of guy. I know JMeter can be run headless. I like to see the GUI. I like to have charts and graphs and like to see what's going on. So we dedicate a 5th VM totally just for the JMeter console. And fortunately, it runs over Xwin, so that's a little clunky. But once it comes up, it actually works. It works all right. So that's how we do it. And so far, we've been able to generate, I think, upwards at Payless, we were able to generate upwards of 2,000 virtual users, 500 per agent. I believe, does that sound right, Devin?
No, it was more than that.
Was it more than that, 2,500?
Well, we were pushing 3,000 sessions an instance. So 50,000 instances or 50,000 sessions.
Yeah.
But other virtual users have got time delay and put more out of them.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of traffic.
Anyway, using those 4 agents, we were able to spin up quite a large number of virtual users, and it works. And we're not paying $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 for a piece of software like a Mercury Load Runner, or it's freeware, shareware. Of course, it has its issues because it's basically your support comes from forums and blog posts and whatnot, which obviously you're paying for. You're getting the support with paid-for tools. So, but that's basically what we do, and it seems to be working really well so far. We're able to add on additional agents as needed if we need to generate more load through the use of additional add-on plugins. There's actually a JMeter plugin. I think it's called JMeter Plugin. Adds a lot of nice nifty graphs and charts that the customers love to see, and we've been able to do quite well with it. So what I'm going to show you is just a basic way to record a script. I mean, another beautiful thing about JMeter is that it's very easy to record. Through the use of Firefox, essentially you can just do a click and record, and then a playback. It's really, there's obviously a little more to it than that, but basically that's the gist. So I've got JMeter up here. So first, we have our basic test plan. First, what we're going to add is add a thread group. So basically, this is your group of virtual users that you're going to use. You have number of threads, ramp up period, etc. Okay. Now, next thing I'm going to add is the HTTP proxy server. This is basically what's going to use Firefox for your recording. Okay. A couple other things I'd like to add is a cookie. HTTP cookie manager, very important for your JSession IDs, for example. If you're not clearing them out after each iteration, you have different virtual users basically jumping on top of each other. Doesn't work very well. So definitely you need to add a cookie manager, no doubt about it. And then finally, you want to see what your results are. So there are two of my favorites. There's quite a few, and the documentation on Apache JMeter is pretty decent about all the different listeners they have available. I can't see. I'll add an aggregate graph anyway, since I can see it at the top. So I add an aggregate report, and then I like to see each individual step as it happens. So I'm going to add a... Actually, I can't see that as well either.
But not built for a 600 pixel high screen?
No. Anyway, for now, we'll stick with the aggregate report since we can see it. So now we want to start recording. So I'm going to make sure we've got the port number set correctly, target controller. Start. Now I'm going to come over to my Firefox and hit CRS demo.
Yep, CRS demo.
So there we go. And you can see when we go back in JMeter, it's basically started recording everything. Now, one thing I'd like to mention, it does record absolutely everything. So it is recording the CSS, it's recording images, JavaScript. There is a way to basically strip that out. I haven't done it here. But right here for URL patterns to exclude, you can enter in through regex expressions. You can enter in, that you want to exclude JavaScript, you want to exclude CSS, so that you're not having all that overhead in your script. So I basically go through. Sometimes it takes longer to actually write the regex expression for me than it is to just. It's easier just to go through and just delete all these non-essential pieces. So I will go through and do that now. It's pretty easy. So next step, at the ATG store, we'll go and we'll look at some shirts. There's our JSession ID here. Obviously, we're going to want to strip that out. So we'll record a couple more pages. Long sleeve, soft touch hoodie, that sounds good. And we didn't create this demo site, this was created by ATG. Probably not the products that we would have chosen to put on the demo site.
The original ATG demo application site will tell you a kid zapper. It's a little taser for controlling your children. I forgot the name of it, but it was one of the funnier parts of the demo.
Lisa remembers back in the old days, Pioneer Cycling and some of the other earlier Motor Prize, yes, another demo site. By the way, Lisa and I did performance testing together at ATG, so we have a long past, I guess. We haven't seen each other in years, though, so. And let's see, we'll do one more. Let's do shoes. Okay, so we've got our script. So I've got 4 steps. I typically, when I'm creating a script, I try to keep them as brief as possible. I've seen, sometimes if you create a script that's too long, it's very difficult to troubleshoot if there's something going wrong with it. I try to keep a sort of a cohesive set of actions contained in one script. I've heard some people say that they try to keep it to 8 steps, some people try to keep it to 20, but basically just as meaningful, without getting too cumbersome, too long. So, once we have that done, we can actually hit stop on the proxy server. So it's going to stop recording now. Save it. And then we're going to choose our number of threads. Actually, one other thing I like to add. If we kept this script in its current state, it's just going to go hog wild against the site. There's going to be no stepping in between. There's going to be no delay, which is completely unnatural and is going to blow up any site. It's just, you try sending 100 users with no think time against the site, and it's not right. What I typically like to do is add one of JMeter's logic. No, that's not it. Sorry. Apologize for this. Oh, sorry. So constant, I tend to add a constant throughput, or another one you can add is constant timer. You can also add that. There are several different timers you can add to add some sort of a think time. That's the one I was looking for. Uniform random timer. So essentially what this does is this is going to be your maximum delay in milliseconds. So it's going to choose a random think time between 0 and say 10 seconds. And I feel that that's probably fairly representative of the average user usage. I don't know, anywhere from you might have some really fast users that are going to be able to buzz through a site at maybe a second or two in between. You're going to have somebody else just sitting there thinking about the purchase that they're about to make. It might be 10 seconds. So I typically like to use this as the uniform random timer, so a maximum delay of 10 seconds and minimum of 0 seconds.
And if you have an existing site, you probably have metrics on what you're actually using.
Yeah, exactly.
Use it to make sure the load test matches your real world load as much as possible.
So that's the other thing I like to add. And I'm going to go over, and since it wasn't allowing me, I was running at JMeter locally, and I tried to use our remote agents running at the 4 data centers, and the communications wasn't working quite as well as I want it. So we're actually going to be using the remote console running at one of the data centers, one of the soft layer data centers. There it is. So, I've set this for a number of threads, 5. We're going to do a loop counter forever. Let's click on summary report here. Now, like I said, this is running over X11, so it's a bit slow. That's probably a piece that we may want to improve upon in the future, going forward, if we can figure out a different way to get the GUI without the X. But as of right now, this is what we've done. So I'm going to start my agents. As you can see, I have some SSH sessions going, and you can see these are for, this is for one of the agents. It's getting the call, and it knows to start running. It's tough to see in here. All right. There we go. No, don't worry about this error. Engine is busy. Of course it's busy because I just told it to do something. Once you hit OK, it should start. I'm not quite sure why that's happening. It's a new thing.
Keeps us on our toes.
Yeah. Okay. Get that out of the way. Any moment now. Ah, here we go. Okay. So now we've got the good stuff. So this is the summary report we're looking where we've got the label, which you can choose any label you want, something maybe a little more meaningful than this. So these are the different paths we're hitting, number of samples, error percentage, and your throughput. So I think we'll let that go for a few minutes. And then Devin's going to show us how he gathers performance statistics from the site. Yes?
I've never used multiple JMeter plans. So when you do that, from the GUI, and you click Start, do they all start in a coordinated way? How does that work?
Start simultaneously. It's a little strange how it works. So say, for example, you have 4 JMeter agents that you've set up, plus the console, and you say via the console you want to start up 25 users. In actuality, that's 100 users. So, because what it does is it sends out 25, it sends out the request for 25 virtual users to each agent that you've set up.
So where do you set up the list of agents? So
within JMeter.properties, within the bin directory and JMeter, there's I think it's remote_agent or something. Anyway, you list the IP address or the host name and the port number, which I think by default is 1099. So you put in however many agents you want, and then once you reopen JMeter, it'll know what you're doing. So that's one limitation that I've found, is that the number kind of lies. When you ask for the number of threads, you say 25. If you've got 4 agents, it's really going to be 100. So you've got to watch out for that. Now the final numbers in the report reflect the true number of sessions that you've created. However, when you're actually looking at the actual number of VUs, it's only going to report the initial number you put in.
So the GUI is collecting statistics from all the agents all the time.
That's correct, yeah. So there is a good amount of overhead involved, a good amount of network traffic, so that's something you need to take into consideration too.
Do you have a question?
I do have a couple of questions.
Sorry, I'm
So when you're setting up and recording this whole thing, I noticed you deleting a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not familiar with this tool, so it seemed to me like you were deleting all of the sub-requests or any of the non-primary page requests.
Yeah, essentially, best practice for generating test scripts, you typically just want to go with the actual page request itself.
It depends on what your situation is. In this case, there's a CDN in front of it, so hammering on JavaScript, spending JMeter resources pulling JavaScript out of the CDN, not helping us drive load of the application.
Okay, that makes sense.
So,
yeah, I guess in our case, we were trying to hit the actual app servers themselves.
We're trying to stress the JBoss instance.
And we're not really concerned about the other pieces. So.
But if you had left those in place, it would have been kind of a standard page requesting. It would have gone in the same order, but it would have done all of those sub requests.
Correct.
All right. And then my second question is, you had something like 3 timers you set up?
Yeah,
Are they all just defining the same timer?
That was my mistake. I was sort of fumbling through trying to. I couldn't remember. The problem with JMeter and the listeners is I think they created too many different types of timers and too many different types of listeners. So it's so granular, and some of the listeners kind of do base more or less the same thing. So I was fumbling through that. So typically you just add. You want to keep the minimum number of listeners, especially listeners, as possible, because they're collecting data. So you're creating a lot of network traffic per listener. So I try to keep that at a minimum. And timers, I guess it all depends on how you want to space out or pace your users. It can get a bit tricky. So yeah, that was just me fumbling.
Just to clarify, this is a different script than the one that we
correct. Right? Well, it's more or less the same, but I'm running this remotely at one of the data centers because I couldn't get the communication between my local machine and the remote agent VMs. They weren't talking very well, so. Any other questions?
It's easy to set up different types of thread groups. Like if you have one user that's going to look at this product and another user that's going to interact with the site in a different way. It's easy to set up so it uses both those patterns or a number of patterns rather than the same one.
Absolutely. They actually have a concept of you could split out percentage of users. So you can set it up in your thread group so that you have, say, 30% of users are going to go down a different path and they're going to go and browse the site and actually make a purchase, check out as maybe a guest user. You may have 50% that's just going to browse the site and look at a few products. You may have 10% that are actually going to register and go through the whole product. You can set it up to different percentages. You can branch out. You can actually have it interleaving where you can it'll go at random. So if you set up a few different steps, it'll choose at random which step to go through. There are a lot of things that you can do with it, and it can get pretty complex as far as.
Yeah, is it easy to manage that kind of stuff?
I try to keep it. I'm sort of the motto, keep it simple, stupid. So I really try to keep things as simple as possible and only get as complicated as the end user or the client is asking for. You can get really fancy, and then it just gets kind of crazy, and especially for troubleshooting, you have no idea what it's doing. You've got too many different steps and too many different random pieces in there. So I try to keep it simple. But I've seen other scripts where people do some pretty funky, cool stuff. So it depends on, there's definitely a learning curve involved with that piece of it. It's very easy to set up a simple script. To start actually creating different random user actions, and that gets a little more complicated.
JMeter also has different kind of plugins and options available for generating non-HTTP load. So you can generate RMI load or web services, which I've done a lot in the past, is stress testing web services. Certainly, you can do a lot more than just web apps, but obviously the focus today is on web.
Database, you did their plugins for the database. I mean, there's all types of stuff.
Yeah, it's a very, very powerful tool.
You'll be able to get logs, and if I have like a set of logs, will I be able to put it in kind of replay?
Replay the logs?
Yeah, so
If you're trying to troubleshoot.
Like playback what actually happened.
yeah.
So I think the question is like, let's say user number 1 out of 25 like crashed and burned.
Yeah.
You want to be able to say, okay, let me play back all that traffic so I can try and reverse engineer what actually happened.
I see. Yeah, that
Is that right?
gets a little.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you can set up listeners that will listen for individual events and let you see the requests and full response bodies. At high loads, that generates a hilarious amount of data and can really overwhelm your entire system. So
that was actually going to be one of, you know what, I could show it on here. That was going to be one of the listeners I added, but I couldn't see it because it was below the page for the screen. Let's take a look at the view results tree. I think this will actually shows individual events, the view results tree. So it shows each page.
go X Windows.
Yeah.
Could you actually configure it to only record or show events in case of an error, or
Yes.
based on that?
Yes, that is well.
Everything because it's going to definitely overrun.
Here we go. This is what I typically do. Say, when we're actually doing a real load test, I'll use this particular listener, which is the view results tree, and I'll set it to log display only errors. So it's only going to show, it'll only log it to this if there was an error with the listener, I mean with the particular thread. And see, this shows you what the sampler result is, what the actual request was.
So
We're getting there.
one more question.
Yeah.
So in this case, let's say if you want to actually look at the response and then decide whether or not it's an error, like not just the HTTP errors.
Okay.
If you make a request, get the response back, and based on within the response, you like look at some part of XML or something, and then determine whether or not it's an error. In that case, how easy is it to configure?
I see. Yeah, you probably. I think you can do something like that.
I think if you want to go off of situations that are not based on HTTP response codes, so you want to check for certain data or certain structure of the page, you can set up assertions. You add those to your test plan, and you can assert that the response matches some set of rules.
That happens when you are testing web services, for example. You send a message and you're expecting the XML or JSON or whatever the server. So you can create an exception inside the JMeter. So you say, okay, pass is match whatever I expect, did not fail.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So your test is now running at steady state, steady rate. It did its initial ramp up, whatever that was, and now it's steady state.
Correct.
Is there a way to gradually ramp it up and up and up and discover when my site breaks? What's the transaction rate when I start to fail?
Well,
So I know you can set configuration values that say when it exceeds a threshold of X error percent or response times go above blah, I'm done. And then you can set your ramp up and your peak at some ridiculous value, like I might be pushing 100,000 requests a second, right? And then as long as you've got those, I don't know what the config values are when you're building the test, but you can say, error rate must be less than 5%, or response time across X samples must be less than 5 seconds, or whatever it is. You should be able to hit those points and know when you hit them. That helps.
and there's also the plugin, the JMeter plugin that I was talking about, which is downloaded. Here it is. JMeter plugins. Every load test needs some sexy features. So
a little rough on the top there.
It's some sex, right?
anyway, essentially this sort of adds on to some of the lacking features in JMeter, including the ability to control more granularly your ramp up and your steady state time, and then actually your ramp down time. So yes, you definitely can set it up, and I would definitely recommend anybody who hasn't used JMeter plugins to take a look at it, because there definitely are some more features in it that definitely extend JMeter.
The summary results table we were looking at earlier, is
Yep.
that saved in a particular format or can it be exported? Or
It's saved in the JTL format, which is a proprietary JMeter thing. But you can usually what I do is and then export it to CSV file,
okay.
and then you're open, you're golden from there.
But is there a way to actually export automatically all your results get exported to a database somewhere that you could always query at the content?
Basically, to export your results into a database. Is that? Yeah, I'm not sure. I suspect that somebody's probably done it. I've never done it myself. I usually just have it sent to a file, a JTL file. But sounds like something's telling me that there is definitely a way to do that. I just haven't done it. Anybody else?
All right.
Oh, yes.
All those remote agents.
Yeah.
So let's suppose say 4 different domains and the agents will run. Are the requests really coming over the net of those agents, or is it just a simulation of the JMeter part where you just specify different values in the request?
No, they are coming. They actually really are coming from those. Yeah, exactly. Which is actually, it's kind of cool. So when you're hitting the site and you're looking at it from the site piece, you're seeing requests coming from those different areas, those 4 different agents. So you're seeing some requests maybe coming from Singapore, Seattle, Washington D.C.
We actually used that recently for one of our clients that has a strong international customer base. We host their site out of Europe, but their clients buy from all over. So when we ran load tests for them, we distributed the load across the entire world. So we had realistic network delays and network conditions that would represent users from those countries. So pretty cool.
All right.
Anything else?
No.
Sure. Yeah, just one question. Have you done any monitoring to check that if you're doing higher load levels, that what JMeter says it's doing is actually what it's doing in terms of concurrent threads?
That'll tie a little bit into where I'm going, which is monitoring the results of this on the application tier. But you can also, if you're running through Apache, you can check the web server stats and that kind of stuff. When JMeter is unable to meet what you're asking it to do, you're going to see huge CPU spikes, and generally if you're monitoring the health of the JMeter agent VMs or servers, you'll see the problem there before you're seeing stuff actually getting dropped. I don't remember offhand if JMeter records if it's unable to meet its stats or not, or its goals. It does record all of the stats. So.
Sometimes it just chokes. It locks up. Yeah.
I think that's tangentially what kind of power do you throw, like what kind of VMs are you actually using?
I've been using dual core VMs with 12 gig. I found that RAM is probably the most important with the agents, so I've been giving it 12 gigs of RAM for each agent, and that seems to work really well.
For how many users per agent?
Typically I do 250 virtual users per agent, but I think you could probably get away with 500.
And the console itself?
The console is probably the flakiest piece. So I just keep the console. I run a dedicated VM just for the console. Because especially if you're doing a lot of charting and graphing, that can take up a lot of memory. So I typically use about 12, same stats for the for that VM for the console as well, 12 gigs of RAM. Yeah. All right, thank you very much. And now we've created our load, and Devin's going to show us what we've done.
I'm going to do a giveaway first because I know it's getting a little bit late, so I know people have trains to catch and that kind of stuff. So we have to earn our pizza. So we luck out in that we run a lot of resources in SoftLayer and use SoftLayer for a ton of stuff. If you want to talk about SoftLayer later, happy. So it's very easy for us to say, okay, I want 4 VMs or 40 VMs scattered across the world. I want them spec'd out at large, 12 gigs or 16 gigs of RAM. I want dual core, I want quad core, whatever. Let them all hooked up on a private GigE plus network. I want private fiber between the data centers. It's easy for us to do that. And some folks it may not be as easy, or it may not be something you want to spend any time on. So the folks who bought us pizza, have basically done what we do manually and made it a web service. So called JMeter. It's a commercial JMeter cloud-based offering that does more or less what Steve does, but through a snappy web interface instead of ordering up VMs and configuring consoles through X, Windows, and that kind of stuff. So if you want to get your feet wet in generating more load than you can off your laptop, this is a pretty good option to check it out. So basically the scripting stuff is you do record a JMeter script the way Steve showed you, and you upload it to them. They've got 7 locations across the world, and you have really nice little web interface to dial in how many servers you want, how many users, requests. You can configure all that very easily on their website, and you hit the go button and it generates the load and gives you all the pretty graphs up on the website itself. So you can do up to 60 dedicated servers. So we're using 4. I think theirs are like single core, so we're using probably more like 8 or 12 of what they would call a server. But they can give you up to 60 of them just for your test, dedicated out of their bigger cloud. Let's see. They also integrate with Jenkins. So if you're using Jenkins for CI, you can make automated load testing part of your deployment process, which is kind of cool. You know, APIs. Here's an example of your JMeter script here, and then your concurrent users, your ramp-up period, number of iterations, durations, what version you want to run it under. So if you have specific JMeter features that require a certain older or newer version, you can pick a version. They've got a million other options as well. It's pretty impressive what you can do with it. And you get pretty graphs. Response time and hits per second and error rates and 500 error codes and drill through. So in a lot of ways it's a easier and prettier version of what we do, but obviously there's a cost to it, but it's actually really reasonable in the world of load testing. If you've ever paid for any of the Keynote or Gomez to do serious load testing for you, you know what kind of numbers I'm talking about. And if you are willing to do a little bit of legwork yourself, you can get it done a lot cheaper. JMeter is definitely a good option for that. Does anyone have a letter on the back of your sticker? New Relic, what I'm going to talk about next, has given us 4 copies of the Lean Startup and 2 Data Nerd t-shirts. If anybody wants it. If you have an S on the back of your sticker, you get a shirt. If you have a B, you get a book. Nobody? What do you got?
I got a book.
You get a book? Anybody else? Yeah, I got that. You got a book. What do you got? B. That doesn't look like a B. Yeah, it's a terrible B, but it's my B. You got a B. All right. Anyone get an S? There are 2 S's out there. You got an S. Nobody? All right, mine. I'll figure out some way to give it out. There's an S somewhere. All right.
That's load testing.
All right. This product called New Relic. It's a web application or software as a service, or whatever you want to call it. It does application and server monitoring. There's 2 pieces to it. There's Server Monitor, which is if you're running Linux or Windows or whatever, it's a piece of software that installs and it tracks your actual physical server, which I think I can actually show you here somewhere. There we go. It tracks stuff like memory usage, CPU utilization, disk, network I/O, processes, and you can set alerts. So in some ways it's similar to what you see with a Hyperic or Nagios or something like that. All put up here where it's very easy to get to and drill through and look at historical information, and all that's pretty useful. So this is where we're running that. So you can see the CPU load go up here as we're running load test. Again, not very much, but it's fine. The other piece that they have is an application level plugin. That application plugin is available for Java applications, .NET, PHP, Ruby on Rails, and I want to say a couple others. and it goes in and drops into your application stack. For Java, which is what I do, it goes in at a little command line argument pointing to the jar as the Java agent, and instruments your whole JVM. And unlike a lot of the other instrumentation things, we're seeing a sub 5% performance hit for doing the instrumentation, which is very, very good. It's very lightweight. And it just drops in and runs quietly behind the scenes and sends back a bunch of information to the New Relic mothership, giving you, wait, back to where I was lost. There we go. Giving you lots of stats about your application, and again, set thresholds and all this stuff. One of the things it does is for Java, it'll automatically insert JavaScript tags into your generated JSPs as they're compiled in the server pipeline, which gives you auto instrumentation for your whole web app, which is kind of nice. You can turn that off if you're like, hey, stay out of my JSPs, but if you want real user-end monitoring of how much time is spent in network requests versus DOM parsing versus whatever, it's really nice. You don't have to do any manual coding for it. And then the application tier monitors everything going to the servers in JBoss, Tomcat, whatever it is. So the cool part is it ties all that together. We go to the end user overview. This data is there we go. This data is being generated by those JavaScript marker tags that are shoved in the JSPs. Since JMeter does not render or does not execute JavaScript, you're not seeing JMeter traffic in this panel. You're seeing me clicking around while he was running the load test. If you're running a real site, and I can show you guys that later if you want, you see all of the real user data. You see how much time is spent in different layers. In this case, the network is taking a long time, page rendering in one case, and again, this is not super, this is one guy clicking around, but you see how much time the web app takes versus DOM processing and all the pieces of it, which is very useful. You also see the pages per minute. AppDex is basically a user satisfaction score, and it's based on how quickly stuff goes. It's kind of it's a big standard, and so you can set thresholds and monitor based on that. You can compare. You can see where people are coming from. And I would like to show a better one of our live clients later on, so you can see what real data looks like here. But this is basically the user view of your site in real time. Who's seen pages that are fast? Who's seen pages that are slow? How happy are people? What kind of abandonment are you having? Pretty useful stuff. So the cool part is I can click in. You can say, okay, well, this is slow. And now I'm into the app server during that same time period. This is where you're seeing all of the actual traffic generated by the load test over here. It's a little squished. I apologize for because of the low screen size. But it shows you your slow transactions. In this case, it's 245 milliseconds. The standard is anything over 2 seconds is slow, but nothing in the demo app is over 2 seconds. So I had to dial the threshold way down to get stuff to show up here for you guys. But it shows you what slow transactions have happened recently, which is great. You can show all slow transactions. And you can sort by response time or the average response time. So response time is basically going to be the worst scenario that happened. Average is going to be where am I feeling the most pain across the board. The reason this one's showing up multiple times is it's got different parameters to show different products. Each one's considered unique. So let's go ahead and pick one of these guys. So here's what's happening based on duration spent. Right? There's a SQL statement, which is an inventory select, that ran 312 times to generate this page. Now overall it only took 76 milliseconds, which means each actual select was incredibly fast, but they add up. So whoever coded this up in the first place was probably not expecting catalog data that was going to generate 312 requests to render one page. Right? So inventory lookup is very quick, but because of how many SKUs they've got for this product, how many size and color combinations they happen to have, is doing inventory checks for all of them before it renders out the page to let you pick what you want. So this is one of those situations where what you think you know is fast may not actually be fast in real life. Now in this case, we're still talking under 100 milliseconds, and it's a demo site, so I don't care. But you look at this and you say, well, geez, that's crazy. Let me rewrite the page, or maybe I can cache the inventory, right? Maybe I don't need real time. Maybe I need within a minute. So every page view, I can put a 60-second cache in there and keep that inventory data, make things faster, take load off the database. In this particular instance, we can set up a different repository caching mechanism that does invalidation across the entire cluster when things get updated. So I can use that as a cache instead of a page cache, but avoid making these database calls that are obviously stacking up pretty, in high numbers. You can see the SQL statements. So here's the actual SQL that was rendered to generate this particular page. Yes?
So these are coming off the New Relic profile?
Yes. These are coming out of all this data is coming out of the JBoss instance that's running that site through the New Relic plugin and being shipped back to the New Relic app, web app. And so we pull it up here. It's done essentially in real time. There's usually a 30 to 60 second lag between when I actually do it and it shows up here, but it's as near to real time as you can ask for.
And you didn't change your code at all? It just hooks the JDBC calls?
Yes. Yeah, it did not touch the code whatsoever. It does, like I said, it automatically inserts JavaScript tags into the JSPs when they're compiled down to servlets, and then it just instruments the JVM. Magic. You can do specific calls in your code if you're saying they have APIs. You can say, all right, I want to make a specific marker here, or I want this, or whatever. You can totally do that, but this is vanilla, drop the jar in the box, change the config line in the jboss run.conf, restarted JBoss. So pretty painless. But you can see the actual SQL that's generated, how many times it's generated, and the total duration. So you're not just guessing, oh, it's an inventory lookup. Well, it's this specific inventory lookup. You can also set a config where it will actually save the parameters that go in, so you can see what specific query is generating. We don't do that because it generates a lot more data to save, and in some of those queries there could be PII or credit card information kind of stuff being passed around, so we leave that off. You guys can read all this okay? Yeah. So this gives you some really good information. You can use this to help identify where you might want to do better indexing, or get your DBA to look at certain queries, or change how your application is generating those queries. So for instance, we have multiple queries here that are going against the inventory table that are pulling different pieces, different columns out of the table. Right? So here we're selecting the inventory ID, which is great. We're getting a version availability status, and then the separate call we're getting the stock threshold, backorder threshold, coming out of the same table, DCS inventory, with the same inventory ID. So maybe we can change our code to pull all that with one query instead of going to the database twice to get different sets of columns. Just stuff like that gives you visibility into where time's actually being spent in your application under real load in real life. Whether real life is a JMeter test before you go live, or whether real life is after you're live on a day-to-day basis, what people are actually doing on your site. And this is squished, so it's a little weird. But this shows you for that specific page request, for this one user making one page request, we can drill down on exactly what time was spent where. JSPs, including other JSPs. Here's a droplet calling get connection on data source. Here's a SQL query. And you can drive right down through the entire call stack and see exactly what took, how much time. So this droplet had 156 method calls, all of which were very fast, but made 156 method calls. So maybe that droplet can be cleaned up. A lot of these are those inventory queries you're seeing, right? So here's DCS inventory selects. So that droplet is where I want to go to look to try to optimize or cache. And I'm able to drill down to that click, click, click based on real-time data, which is pretty cool. I can also go for slow SQL, although I don't think we have any. Nope. Let's see. The app server map is kind of cool. In this case, it's a super simple demo application, so we don't have a large cluster, but it shows you, here's your physical server with your application, there's only one of them, and then here's your database. You can pull up stats and data on that. For a larger cluster, you'd see all of your pieces built into that application, which is pretty nice. And I think I wanted to show you guys. So here's what pages are taking the most amount of time. Top 5 based on wall clock, get your response time and throughputs. recent slow transactions, all this stuff is coming through here. And then if I want to say, all right, category JSP, here's an overview for it historically, response time and throughput, historical breakdown, what pieces of it are taking more time. So we can see that the product link generator is taking the most time of than other, which is Java code. This demo isn't something that we built, so we don't have all the source code for it, so some of it's compiled with debugging off, so you lose some of the visibility down into the stack traces. But in general, this tool does a pretty good job of seeing what you want to see. One other piece that's very useful is the thread profiler. I don't know if any of you guys have done thread profiling in JVMs before. Usually you have to drop an agent in, you have to restart it, like a your kit or something like that, and then your JVM runs hilariously slowly while you try to replicate something. This lets you do real-time full JVM profiling at the click of a button for any duration you want. So when we're seeing a client have some significant performance issues, or we're doing a large load test, not a 5-minute thing like we did here tonight, but a 4-hour load test, right? I can come in here, I can choose any of my JVMs. So if it's a cluster, it'll list all the JVMs out. I hit Start Profiler, and it will record a full JVM profiling snapshot for that 5 minutes. And that JVM will take a hit in performance, no question. It'll drop 30, 40% performance-wise. And you can see that if you're running load tests. You can see this one server kind of drop off. But you'll get incredible data of exactly what's going on in the JVM during that time period without having to restart, without having to have the JVM be slow for the entire time it's up, and picking which JVM out of your cluster you want to pull that report on in real time. Which for me, maybe there's other tools that do that I've never seen, but for me it's absolutely a game changer because it lets me do profiling when I need to in a production environment versus trying to install a YourKit profiler or something. Like, I love YourKit, right? I'm not trying to pick on them, but all the other profilers are basically the same. You're shutting stuff down, you're installing stuff, you're bringing it back up, it's sluggish, you're crossing your fingers so you can get some good data so you can bring it back down and not like hurt your customers for another hour. So this stuff is pretty cool. I'm rushing a little bit because I know we're a little bit behind schedule, and I'm happy to show folks more and more stuff. You can generate lots of reports about your SLAs, availability. You can hook in, they've got an API for marketing deployments, which you can hook in very easily to a lot of your build systems. We've done it for Bamboo. I think they've got built-in ones for Jenkins. So when you're doing historical reporting, you can see a marker when you deployed a new kit or a new config change, and you can do very easy comparisons of before and after. So you can say, after this deployment, we saw a 30% increase in performance on this page. Well, that's very easily available, which is kind of nice. Lots of alerting you can do. I wouldn't use this to replace an Nagios or a Hyperic or something like that, but it does give you some very good information around when people are seeing, when users are impacted. So a lot of times you run into situations where your app server CPU might spike, but pages are loading just fine. Something else is going on there. You want to look into it, but end users aren't being impacted. There's other situations where your app server CPU might be fine, your database might be fine, your network might be fine, but something's going on that is making your end users' pages load slowly, right? Whether it's some network issue out in front of your site, or whether you've got some sort of weird lock contention going on in your application code, where something's grabbed a lock and it's waiting for it, but it's not turning the CPU, it's polling, right? So you're doing work slowly, but you're not seeing the CPU spikes you associate with being resource bound. This will clue you into that and then let you go click, click, click. Here's the problem. One thing that we found really useful for this is being able to track down garbage collection issues. Obviously, you can use, if you think it's garbage collection, you can go and you can look for that, right? You can set up GC logs in your JVM and you can check for that, or you can hook in a JMX profiler or JMX console to it and you can check that. But a lot of times you might even think that. You can set up thresholds and alerts for how much time spent there, or you can correlate load to JVM usage, whether you need to adjust your heap size or whether GC collection is going to be causing your performance problem that you're seeing on the site. And being able to click through all that in one tool makes it a lot easier to diagnose issues. We're making the standard for all of our clients going forward, and we're trying to sell it into all of our existing clients because our experience with it is that it lets us solve performance problems in production in 10 or 15 minutes, or at least identify the root cause and know what a solution is, in situations that literally have taken us days or weeks before, where we're saying we know something's slow. All right, let's get a copy of that data loaded into Stage. Let's run a load test against Stage because we can't impact production where the money's happening. And all right, we're going to put a Yorkit profiler in there. We're going to be pulling stack traces and running those through a thread dump analyzer and spending all this time and effort. And literally click, click, click. Oh, this droplet is hilariously slow. All right, let's go look into droplets in ATG servlet that does specialized stuff in a page. But we've been blown away with how quick this makes root cause analysis and for our web applications and our clients' web applications. And then the benefit when you're doing performance testing before launch is also pretty huge. But we're sold on it. It isn't free, which is one of the, everyone loves a free tool. The most expensive way to get this, I think, is $150 a month per server. That's per physical box. So if you're running multiple applications on a box, it's all included. If you're at the point, and I'm making some generalizations here, right? If you're at the point where you're worried about performance, to the point where it makes sense to be doing this level of instrumenting and the level of tools, $150 a month is pretty cheap. The impact that you get from this is massive. My own site, I run 10-minute mail. It does a fair bit of traffic. It's on the Alexa top 1,000 or top 10,000 in the world. I fired this up on it and discovered that there was one area where I was using an unsynchronized map for multiple threads. And it doesn't error out, and it doesn't do anything wrong, but it's incredibly slow. And it burns CPU like you wouldn't believe. But not enough that I noticed I was doing a lot of traffic. So, hey, CPU, stuff's not super fast, but I'm not doing, 50 pages a second all day long. So, okay, that's decent, I can understand that. In 2 seconds, this showed me, hey, you screwed up your code right here. I fixed that. CPU utilization went from 2.5 load average on the box to 0.5, and page response times were 20% better. So, easy fix, pays for itself. So I'm bullish on this, if you couldn't tell. But anyways, nice tool to have in your arsenal. Combined with JMeter, I think it's a very nice combination. And then obviously you've got this for the rest of the life of production life of the application. So I know almost 10 over, but questions? Yes?
Question. So when it collects all the data, it's back to the mothership. Is the mothership something like the New Relic controls, or can you set it up in your own VM?
As far as I know at this point, it's only something that New Relic controls. I don't think they're selling this as a self-hosted product offering. Okay. Definitely feel free to ask them. But yeah, at this point, it's something that they're managing. All the communication is done over SSL. They're PCI certified, pretty secure. But if you have data that you're super sensitive about, it might not be a good option for you. So it's definitely something to consider. The upside is not having to manage it, which can be nice. So you don't have to worry about hard drive failing and tool issues and configuration and all that.
What are they in terms of exception reporting and rollup?
Yeah. And I don't know if we've generated any errors here, but let's see. Yeah, here we go. This is really hard to see. This is a session timeout. I wish this was bigger. It shows a count, and so these are errors, and this is serves back to 409 or something like that. It's basically just a session timeout, so it's not a big deal. But here's 19. It shows the message, the URL, so 409, the thread name. If there's a request trace associated with it, you can dive into that. In this case, it's just a timeout, so there's no code failure. You can share this error, which is nice. If you use Jira, you can file a ticket on this error, and it automatically includes the information from this and a link back to this in the tool. You can also file a ticket from any of the slow transactions. So you can identify, where we were here, looking at all the inventory calls, right? So you can, let's see, here's my thread summary. Transaction traces is what I want. So we look at this, and I can say, all right, I'm making 662 price lookups. So I can file a ticket with Jira. Come on, make me look bad.
Is that hosted Jira or is that behind your firewall?
This Jira is, it will come up for me. Maybe it hates the screen size. I use this all the time. It's in this case, it's using our personal Jira that is publicly accessible for logged in users. So you can set up API credentials for New Relic to auto post into your Jira, or if you're using hosted Jira or whatever, you can use that. They're not vending their own Jira or anything like that, but they do integrate with Jira if you're using it. The nice piece is you can be in here and just bang, create a ticket, have it assigned to the right person, make some notes, it goes back and shows them this graph, and they can see, yes, in fact, this call is doing 662. If you're recording parameters, you'll see all the parameters annotated over here, so they'll know exactly what product and what SKU, and you can even record your SQL parameters, and they can see exactly what queries were run, and it makes fixing the problem 100 times faster. I wouldn't say this is geared specifically toward error analysis in your application, but it does have some functionality that lets you see the frequency of errors, where they're happening in the code, and you can set alerts based on those thresholds. The default is anything that has over 5% error rate will flag it.
What's data retention like with this?
Indefinite?
Indefinite.
Yeah. They also will let you save. I don't think I've done one with. This goes back. Maybe they have some theoretical limits. We haven't hit it yet. We've been using it for the last 6 months for a ton of apps. They've never dropped anything. We don't have one here. When you do profilers dumps, it will save all the profile dumps you've taken for this application historically, so you can compare between them, or pull up old profiler dumps and see what data was in it. It's very nice if you've ever had to deal with profiling dumps and managing 100 of them that you have saved across your laptop. Having them all here, big fan. Any other questions? Nothing. All right. Anybody want a shirt? Done. He's got fast hands. There you go. All right. Yeah, I'm good. If you have other questions, you want to talk about anything, I'm going to be hanging around for a little bit. But yeah, that's all I had. Thank you.